Here we have an Xbox One X that came in for an HDMI connector replacement. The reason I wanted to make this video is not to show you how to replace an HDMI port. I've done that a lot of times on many devices, but I want to go over a different way on how to solder an HDMI connector. You know how we always use our soldering iron to solder all the pins of the HDMI connector? Today we're gonna solder that connector with reflowing and not soldering the pins. Let's take a look. So we can confirm that we have damage on the HDMI connector. The first thing we want to do is apply low melt solder on the back legs, and we have 6 of them. What low melt solder does is it will lower the melting temperature of the joints so we can easily remove the connector. Let's apply flux. And we're going to soak those joints with low melt solder. That pin is moving now. That's good. We're going to go over to the second pin, and we're going to do that for all 6 pins. We apply flux because flux helps with the flow of solder. And we're going to do the same thing here. And we need more flux. See what happens when we do not have enough flux. We get spikes, bridges, and solder just does not flow right. All 6 pins are soaked with low melt solder. Now we're gonna do the same to the front pins. And we have 19 of them. Apply flux. And we still have some low melt solder left on the tip. A tiny bit of low melt solder goes a long way. You can purchase low melt solder off our site. We are one of the major resellers of low melt solder. Log in to NorthridgeFix.com, click on shop, and you can find all the tools there. Alright, all we have to do is apply a little bit of heat, and we should be able to easily remove the connector. And look at that. And the connector fell down. It fell right off. Let's start by desoldering those pads. And again, we add flux to help with the flow of solder. Wicking is a lot easier with flux. And we just cleaned the holes. Now we're going to flip the board and do the front pins. Front pins are clean. Very nice. Now comes the fun part. We're not going to solder that connector pin by pin, but rather we're going to reflow that connector. And to reflow the connector, we have to pre-apply solder onto those pads. And right now I'm going to use the I2C machine that was sent to us for testing. I did go over it in a previous video, and I mentioned what I like and dislike about the machine. I'm still communicating with the maker, and see if they can possibly fix the quirks of that machine. We're gonna use the micro tip, and I did mention how I love that micro tip. It did an amazing job, and let's see how it's gonna do here. And look at that. I love it. I love it. If I2C can fix the quirks that we talked about in the video, then I think we have a good station here. Look at the way the micro tip performed. And here we have a new HDMI connector. What we're gonna do is reflow that connector down in place. Let's wait a bit until solder hardens, and we should be all good. Let's check and see if all the pins are solid. And look at that. Look at the soldering on that connector. Let's go over the pins. Solid, solid, solid. Wow. Solid. And every single pin is solid. I never seen anybody reflow an HDMI connector, including myself. I've always soldered the pins with a soldering iron, pin by pin. We just soldered 19 pins all at the same time. Let's do the back. And I just want to add a tiny bit of flux here. And we're gonna solder this last joint here. All right, and we're all good. Let's clean up. We did an amazing job. And we're all done. Let's take a look at the HDMI connector and just look at the soldering. Amazing. And that's why I wanted to go over this video, to show you another way to solder an HDMI connector. That's it, the job is done. I'm gonna give this to Big Boss to reassemble and test, and maybe I'll be back to show you that the console is working. All right, Big Boss reassembled and he said no signal. The no signal is probably coming from the retimer chip and not the HDMI port itself. HDMI port is soldered perfectly, so let's go ahead and replace the retimer chip. Xbox One X is very well known to have issues with the retimer chip. So let's go ahead and replace it, and we'll give it back to him to test. So that should solve our problem. Let's double check on the HDMI connector one more time, just to make sure. We already tested, but we're gonna test it again. Solid. And everything is solid. All right, I'll be back. Big Boss is almost ready with the assembly. Yeah, it should work. Yes. Great. Great. So we replaced the HDMI port, we replaced the retimer chip, and the console is working. Thank you, Big Boss.